Hey everyone, and welcome back to Your Brain Lied. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something huge, something you really want, but your feet are just glued to the ground? Like there's an invisible force holding you back? I bet we've all been there. And more often than not, that force isn't some external obstacle. It's something internal. It's the fear of failure. That fear, that little voice whispering, or sometimes shouting in your ear about all the ways things could go wrong. It's a liar. Today we're going to unpack why that fear can be so paralyzing and how we can start to reframe failure, not as a life sentence, but as invaluable feedback. It's about finding freedom on the other side of that fear. So let's dive in. Let's start by acknowledging something. Fear of failure is totally normal. It's wired into us. Think back to caveman days. A bad hunt could mean starvation. Making a wrong move could mean becoming someone else's dinner. So our brains are naturally wired to avoid things that could potentially harm us. And in the modern world, even though the stakes aren't usually life or death, our brains can still treat a failed project, a missed opportunity, or a rejected proposal as a serious threat. This fear manifests in a bunch of different ways. Maybe you're constantly procrastinating on a big project at work. You keep finding urgent things to do instead of actually tackling the thing that scares you. Or maybe you have a brilliant business idea, but you never even start because you're too afraid of it not working out. Or perhaps you're hesitant to put yourself out there in your personal life. You avoid initiating conversations, expressing your feelings, or pursuing your interests. Because what if you get rejected? What if people judge you? The common thread here is avoidance. We avoid the things we fear failing at, which, ironically, often leads to even bigger problems down the road. Because that dream business idea that's never started, that can lead to regret. That important project that's constantly delayed, that can lead to stress and even job insecurity. That reluctance to be vulnerable and express your feelings, that can lead to loneliness and a feeling of disconnection. So why does this fear have such a hold on us? Well, part of it comes down to perfectionism. Our society often celebrates flawless outcomes, shiny success stories, and overnight transformations. We see highlight reels on social media, carefully curated to portray perfect lives. We start to believe that anything less than perfect is, well, a failure. Think about someone who's always wanted to learn to play the guitar. They buy a beautiful instrument, download a few lessons, but after a few frustrating attempts to master a chord, they give up. I'm just not musically talented, they might say. I guess I'm not cut out for this. But here's the thing. Nobody starts out as a guitar virtuoso. Everyone stumbles, everyone makes mistakes, everyone sounds terrible at first. But the people who eventually become good at guitar are the ones who keep practicing, who embrace the awkwardness, who see those initial struggles as part of the learning process. Another reason the fear of failure is so powerful is because we often tie our self-worth to our accomplishments. We believe that if we succeed, we're worthy, valuable, and competent. But if we fail, we're somehow flawed, inadequate, and unworthy of love and belonging. Imagine a recent college graduate applying for jobs. She puts her heart and soul into crafting the perfect resume, writing compelling cover letters, and preparing for interviews. But after several rejections, she starts to feel like she's not good enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough, she thinks. Maybe I chose the wrong major. Maybe I'll never find a job. She's equating her job search success with her intrinsic worth as a human being. The rejections aren't just about the job, they're about her value as a person. Now let's talk about how our brains play tricks on us when it comes to failure. One common trick is catastrophizing. We take a small setback and blow it out of proportion. We imagine the worst possible outcome, even if it's highly unlikely. Let's say you are giving a presentation at work. You fumble a few words, accidentally skip over a slide, and notice a few people looking bored. Your brain jumps to the conclusion that everyone thinks you're incompetent, that your boss is going to fire you, and that your career is over. That's catastrophizing. You're taking a minor hiccup and turning it into a full-blown disaster. Another brain trick is confirmation bias. Once we're convinced that we're going to fail, we start looking for evidence to support that belief. We focus on the negative aspects of a situation, ignore the positive ones, and interpret neutral events as further proof that we're doomed. Imagine someone who is starting a new exercise routine. They miss one workout because they are feeling under the weather. Instead of brushing it off as a temporary setback, they use it as evidence that they are too lazy and undisciplined to stick with it. See? They think, I knew I couldn't do it. I always fail at these things. This confirmation bias reinforces the fear of failure and makes it even harder to break free from the cycle of avoidance. Okay, so we know the fear of failure is normal, that it's often tied to perfectionism and self-worth, and that our brains can play tricks on us to make it seem even worse than it is. But here's the good news. We can change our relationship with failure. We can reframe it, not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Think of failure as feedback. It's information. It's data. It's your brain's way of saying, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something different. Let's go back to the person learning to play the guitar. Instead of getting discouraged by those initial struggles, they can see them as valuable feedback. Maybe they need to adjust their technique. Maybe they need to find a different teacher. Maybe they just need to practice a little bit longer. But instead of giving up, they use that feedback to improve and grow. This is about shifting your perspective. Instead of asking yourself, what if I fail? Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Instead of focusing on the potential negative outcomes, focus on the potential positive outcomes. What new skills can you develop? What new connections can you make? What new insights can you gain? Remember the college graduate who was struggling to find a job. Instead of seeing those rejections as proof that she's not good enough, she can use them as feedback to improve her job search strategy. Maybe she needs to refine her resume. Maybe she needs to practice her interview skills. Maybe she needs to network more effectively. Each rejection is an opportunity to learn and grow. One of the most powerful tools for reframing failure is to focus on effort rather than outcome. This means celebrating the process, the hard work, the dedication, regardless of the final result. Think about someone training for a marathon. They might not win the race or even finish in their desired time. But if they put in the effort, if they trained consistently, if they pushed themselves to their limits, then they've already achieved something amazing. They've demonstrated resilience, discipline, and a commitment to their goals. This is also about being kind to yourself. It's about acknowledging that you're human, that you're going to make mistakes, and that it's okay to stumble. It's about treating yourself with the same compassion and understanding that you would offer to a friend who was going through a tough time. Imagine you tried a new recipe that didn't turn out well. Instead of beating yourself up for not being a good cook, you might say to yourself, well, that was a learning experience. I tried something new and it didn't work out. But that's okay. I'll try again next time. This self-compassion is essential for building resilience and overcoming the fear of failure. It allows you to keep moving forward, even when things get tough. Let's be clear. Reframing failure doesn't mean that you'll never feel disappointed or frustrated when things don't go your way. It's about learning to manage those emotions in a healthy way. One technique is to challenge your negative thoughts. When you find yourself thinking, I'm a failure, ask yourself, is that really true? Is there any evidence to support that belief? What are some other possible explanations for what happened? You might realize that you are being too hard on yourself, that there are other factors that contributed to the outcome, and that you're actually more capable and resilient than you give yourself credit for. Another technique is to practice gratitude. Focus on the things you're grateful for in your life, even the small things. This can help to shift your perspective and remind you that there's more to life than just your accomplishments. Maybe you're grateful for your health, your family, your friends, your comfortable home, or your ability to learn and grow. Whatever it is, focusing on gratitude can help you to feel more positive and resilient, even in the face of setbacks. And finally, remember to celebrate your small wins. Acknowledge your progress, no matter how small it may seem. This can help to build momentum and reinforce your belief in your ability to succeed. Maybe you finally finished that project you've been procrastinating on. Maybe you had a difficult conversation with a loved one. Maybe you simply got out of bed and faced the day, even when you didn't feel like it. These are all victories worth celebrating. So how do you actually put all of this into practice? Here are a couple of actionable steps you can take to start reframing failure as feedback in your own life. First, identify one area of your life where you're currently avoiding taking risks because of the fear of failure. What's one thing you've been putting off? One dream you've been holding back? One opportunity you've been afraid to pursue? Write it down. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I try and fail? Be honest, but also be realistic. Are you actually going to lose your job? Are you actually going to ruin your life? Or is it more likely that you'll simply experience some discomfort, disappointment, or temporary setbacks? Once you've identified the worst-case scenario, come up with a plan for how you would cope with it. What steps would you take to mitigate the damage? Who would you turn to for support? Knowing that you have a plan in place can help to reduce your anxiety and make it easier to take the leap. Second, start tracking your failures. Keep a journal or a spreadsheet where you document your mistakes, setbacks, and disappointments. But instead of dwelling on the negative aspects of these experiences, focus on what you learned from them. What did you do well? What could you have done better? What will you do differently next time? Over time, you'll start to see patterns emerge. You'll notice that you're actually learning and growing from your mistakes, and that failure isn't nearly as scary as you thought it was. Reframing failure as feedback is a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you slip up, when you fall back into old patterns of thinking, and when you feel discouraged. That's okay. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. And remember that every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. You're gonna fall, you're gonna scrape your knees, you're gonna feel frustrated. But if you keep getting back on the bike, if you keep practicing, if you keep learning from your mistakes, eventually you'll be able to ride with confidence and joy. The same is true of life. You're going to experience failures, you're going to face challenges, you're going to feel like giving up. But if you keep reframing those experiences as feedback, if you keep learning and growing, you'll eventually be able to navigate life with greater resilience, confidence, and joy. And you'll realize that the fear of failure, that little liar in your head, doesn't have to control you anymore. You can choose to listen to a different voice, a voice that tells you that you are capable, resilient, and worthy of success, even if you stumble along the way. So, as you go about your week, I want you to reflect on these questions. 1. What's one thing you've been avoiding because of the fear of failure? What's one small step you can take this week to move closer to that goal? 2. How do you typically react to setbacks and disappointments? Do you tend to beat yourself up, or do you try to learn from the experience? What's one way you can practice self-compassion the next time you encounter a setback? 3. What are you grateful for in your life right now? Take a few minutes each day to focus on the things you appreciate and notice how it affects your mood and your perspective. Remember, you are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than you realize, and you are capable of achieving anything you set your mind to, even if you stumble along the way. Thanks for joining me on Your Brain Lied today. I hope this episode has given you some new insights and tools for overcoming the fear of failure. Until next time, keep questioning your thoughts, keep challenging your beliefs, and keep living your truth. Take care, subscribe to the channel, see you in the next video.